and if you represent anyone and where you live.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Chairman and committee. My name is Dr. Kate Heil. I am a family medicine and addiction medicine physician in Boise and Nampa, and I am here to represent myself. I'd like to say that I am, again, representing myself and not representing the views of the organization that I work for. So like I said, I'm a primary care and addiction medicine physician in Boise and Nampa, so both Ada and Canyon County. I am against this bill, and I would like to...
Mr. Chairman, I am so sorry. I can't quite understand.
Oh, sorry. I have a really soft voice.
Just right up next to that microphone. I do the same thing.
Okay.
Good job, Representative Mathias.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a soft voice. So I would like to advocate against this bill. So I have a lot of patients who are involved with the criminal justice system, whether that be currently or after they are released from prison. And I think that the difficulty with this bill is it doesn't necessarily differentiate between folks who are using low-level amounts and then those who are using big amounts of fentanyl. So just to kind of quantify what my patients tell me is I can have patients who are using anywhere from like 3 to 6 pills per day up to about 30 pills per day. So 100 pills per day 100 pills would be about 3 days worth. And then to quantify the amount of grams, I've had people tell me anywhere from like 0.5 gram to 1.5 grams, with about 1 gram being an average. So what I am also kind of worried about is this doesn't allow the judge to make a decision kind of based on what the person, their intent is. We do know also that there is a fair amount of substance use in prison. About 65% of folks who are imprisoned do meet criteria for a substance use disorder, and up to about 19% report regular use of opioids while they're in prison. We do know that the opioid overdose risk is about 10 to 12 times the amount of the general population once somebody gets out of prison. So I think that we, as a physician, we always think about what are our next steps, what are we going to do?
To wrap up.
Okay. And if this bill does pass, how are we going to improve treatment for these folks if they do get into prison?
Thank you. Are there any questions of the testifier? Thank you for your time. No questions.
Thanks.
Gus Powell. Is Gus Powell here? Oh, strike that, Gus. Hold on a second. Jennifer Zielinski, welcome. You know the drill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Zielinski. I'm here from Boise, and I'm representing the Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition.
That name again?
Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition.
Thank you.
Yes. So I echo pretty much everything that everyone is saying today, but we do come from a little bit of a different perspective. So what's important is holding individuals accountable for selling dangerous drugs like fentanyl. It is equally important to acknowledge the complex circumstances some individuals find themselves in. Human trafficking victims, for instance, may be coerced and forced into selling drugs, including fentanyl. These individuals are often vulnerable and lack freedom of choice. Implementing strict penalties such as mandatory minimum sentences without considering the circumstances and potential victimization of the offenders can lead to unjust outcomes. These victims may face lengthy prison terms despite having been forced into committing illegal acts against their will. To ensure fairness and protect innocent individuals caught up in these situations, lawmakers should advocate for comprehensive approaches that address the root causes of drug trafficking. These include supporting policies that focus on victim support and rehabilitation rather than solely relying on punitive measures. Victims of human trafficking are often coerced and forced into drug use as a means of control by their traffickers. They may be given drugs to create dependency or addiction, making it easier for traffickers to manipulate them. Victims are frequently exploited as drug mules, transporting and dealing drugs as part of the traffickers' illegal activities. This not only puts them at risk of legal repercussions, but also allows the traffickers to profit from their victimization. Finally, traffickers may force victims to commit crimes such as drug trafficking, theft, or fraud, often directly linked to the exploitation they are subjected to. We estimate 65 to 70% of the victims that we've served have been used as drug mules by their traffickers. We just ask that you consider various factors, including the impacts on victims. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony, your patience waiting to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Now, Mr. Powell. I called you Gus earlier. I apologize. I don't know if we've met or not before. So welcome to committee. You know the drill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Gus Powell. I'm a native Idahoan. Have 2 teenagers, live in Meridian. I'm here representing myself. Over the past 20 years, as a certified registered nurse anesthesiologist, I've been practicing anesthesia in an independent setting. And one of the things I want to do is to provide some context for, the other drugs that are on the mandatory minimum list, and we hear pounds and kilos, and we're talking about grams and milligrams today. And I'm even going to take it a little bit farther and lift micrograms. In giving anesthesia on a daily basis, the fentanyl situation in our society, many patients, when they ask what they're getting and I say fentanyl, their eyes are in distress. I have to reassure them and let them know of what I am doing. And so from 4 grams on this bill, that is 4 million micrograms. And the lethal dose per DEA is 2 milligrams, which is 2,000 micrograms. My typical dosing for an average surgery is anywhere from 1 to 200 micrograms. Okay, so it was stated earlier, that's 2,000 lethal doses. Now, just 1 lethal dose is more than I would give doing anesthetic for an open heart surgery. And the fentanyl by itself is the big name, but there's also others included, such as sufentanil and carfentanil, among others. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin, but sufentanil is 10 times more potent than fentanyl, and carfentanil is 100 times more potent than fentanyl. This drug, even in our hands in the controlled setting, doses that I give, I noticeably see with controlled monitors, oxygen, etc., changes in respiratory rate, etc. And we have reversal drugs on hand. I trust our law enforcement and our prosecutors and their judgment, just as I would hope all of us would trust me and my colleagues in our judgment when you trust us to do your anesthetic. And I support this bill.
All right, I wasn't watching the timer. I'm not sure how far you went over, but that
Just a second or two.
All right. I'll take your word for it. Any questions? Representative Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Powell, I'm not sure that I'm hung up on the quantities that you're pointing to in the bill, but I am deeply troubled by language in the bill that would make this apply to 4 grams of any mixture that includes any detectable amount of fentanyl. Can you tell me what you know about what that phrase means, any detectable amount of fentanyl? How tiny of a particle of fentanyl can be detected?
Chairman Scott, Representative Cannon, thank you for the question. I'm not qualified to answer that question. I give fentanyl and a myriad of drugs in a short amount of time with an anesthetic, and I see those synergistic effects, but I feel that's a legal prosecutor type question, so I don't feel I'm qualified to answer.
I really appreciate you coming in with your expertise. I learned a few things from you, and I appreciate it. Thank you for waiting and being patient.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Regina Simpson, are you in the room or in the other room?
Mr. Chairman, she submitted it by email, I believe.
Oh, all right. And by the way, committee members are good. Attaché has put things in your folder that you can look at over the weekend, and you'll be able to see those written testimonies been sent in. Matt Clifford.
Well, my notes say good morning, but yeah. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Matt Clifford, and I'm the Sheriff of Ada County. As most of you know, prior to being elected Sheriff, I have worked for the last 21 years as a deputy here in Ada County, with a lot of time on the street as a canine handler that worked hundreds of drugs investigations. During my time in law enforcement, I have not seen a scarier drug trend than fentanyl. I'm here today to support this bill for both my office and for the Idaho Sheriff's Association.
Yeah, right.
Most of what I have written down has already been exhausted. I think what I'd really like to put forward is, we hear a lot of things, a lot of testimonies, but remember, we are talking about adding a dangerous drug to the list of already dangerous drugs that we have that are in our Idaho state code. A drug that is more dangerous than, that we would consider more dangerous than cocaine and meth and heroin. Our drug laws here are some of the toughest in the nation, and I do believe that it is a deterrence. You've heard testimony of, it sounds like Miami Vice, but the drug cartels pay attention to what we are doing state to state, and they know here in this state there are higher penalties for dealing drugs and bringing large quantities into our state. So I would urge you to support the bill. I'd love to take the rest of my time to answer any questions that you may have already asked, because quite frankly, some of the questions are technically incorrect. Some of the answers are technically incorrect, and I'm here for whatever you have.
Representative Mathias.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff Clifford, thanks for being here this afternoon and this morning. So this is a question that I don't think has been asked of anyone who's testified, but it's a common theme that we've heard over and over, and that is all of us want to target the traffickers. None of us want to target I'll call them simple users. Why is there so much reluctance to add language that would clarify that legislative intent and make sure that we're not scooping up people who might have 100 pills, but we're talking about the people who might have 100 pills and cash and scales and baggies and guns and incriminating texts, and the evidence that I think some people on this committee would like to see to help us be more comfortable that we aren't going to use this law to just scoop up users?
Chairman, Representative Mathias, I think that's a great question. I think when I looked at this and some of the things that people were against and people were for, and some of the things that I just kind of heard is, I think we inadvertently want to tell stories in our state code. Some of the questions that were even asked and all the situations that are, well, what if this, what if that? Our state code is not for the stories behind what is happening to the individual. It's a guideline for us as law enforcement and for prosecutors to say, do we charge this person with this crime based on the story that we see before us? So I do understand your question, and I think that it's much simpler to say, this is the penalty if you have these large quantities, instead of tell the story of every user that says, well, if you can have large quantities if this is what your habit is, you can have large quantities if this is what your habit is. That's up to us as law enforcement and prosecutors to work together to realize, is this person really a user? And I've experienced that in my time. Somebody with a trafficking amount of drugs that actually was a user, and you go forward accordingly. I think we want to take the, when we ask the scenario questions, a lot of people want law enforcement officers to be robots until it's time for them to not be a robot, and it's hard to have both. The law is a guideline for us to say, this is what's sitting in front of us. It's not black and white. It's not a little ticker tape's not going to fly out of our brains and say, you get charged with this because of black and white. Every situation we run into is differently. For example, speed limit, we'll oversimplify it. Speed limit, right? Well, the law says that you have to drive the posted speed limit. What it doesn't say is, well, if your wife's in labor, then you might speed a little bit. Or, if you're having a medical problem, your mom's on her deathbed, so you might speed a little bit. It's up to us as law enforcement officers to say, hey, you're speeding. Hey, my wife is pregnant. You're right. Probably we shouldn't give you a speeding ticket. So that's kind of the answer I have is, it's a guideline for us to say what's really happening here. The prosecutors use it as well, and we do work together with the prosecutors to do what's right by our citizens.
Representative Allgood.
Thank you for being here, Sheriff.
Thank you.
It's been brought up today, and I, as an experienced law enforcement officer, you encounter 4 or 5 ounces of marijuana. Somehow, you detect that marijuana may have some fentanyl in it. Are you going to charge that person with possessing 5 ounces of fentanyl?
Chairman Skog and Representative, that is all. I really appreciate you asking that question because I'm not sure it was answered correctly before. The answer is no. The use behind the mixtures thereof, that's because when almost any drug that you have here in Idaho, not all of them, but most of the time when you get large quantities, I don't care if it's meth or cocaine or fentanyl, it's going to be cut with something, right? It's been stepped on, like Donahue said. So we take it in its totality, not we have 5 ounces of marijuana and it is now 5 ounces of fentanyl. I think that is that's a great story to tell, to think that that is going to happen. I don't think I would know any officer on the street that would say, well, we're going to charge them with 5 ounces of fentanyl because it's a mixture of marijuana and fentanyl. I understand the concern. It's not reality.
Representative Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Sheriff Clifford. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you said about the intent and the lack of it in this legislation, that you, as the initial finder of the person, that you have some discretion and you will use your own discretion to choose the path where this is going to go. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
Chairman, Representative, absolutely. And the reverse is true as well. So let's say I use my discretion to say, hey, I think this has happened, and the prosecutor has a bigger look at it and maybe more investigation is even done. They can actually, they can bring the charge up if they need to. So it's not just my choice. We kind of work as a team to figure out what's the whole story. I'll give you a great example. Years ago, and this also answers a question from previously, pulled over a car. He's got 5 grams of, or no, he had almost, it's like half an ounce of heroin in the car. Okay. Well, that is traffic amounts here in Boise, right? It's very trafficking here. Well, he's not from here. He's from California. And he had just gotten here in California. That's not trafficking. And so he brought it here to use because he knew he could get heroin cheaper in California and bring it here to Idaho and use it and not deal with it. Now, my interviews with him, the investigation in total tells me, yes, that is correct. It's still a felony to possess it, but he is not here to sell it. So that's the discretion I have.
Representative Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. Sheriff Clifford. So I'm a big fan of the American criminal justice system, and one of the unique things about it, not only compared to other systems in the world, but also just compared to other things that we encounter in American life, is that it is a system that works with checks and balances of all 3 branches of government and of the people. And what I mean by that is, in a typical case, you've got your folks, law enforcement folks, part of the executive branch, investigating crimes and so forth. You've got prosecutors, part of the executive branch, prosecuting crimes. You've got us, legislators, who are passing these laws. And you've got the judicial branch involved through sentencing and through judicial discretion at sentencing. And you've got the people involved who have the right to be jurors and to kind of act as an ultimate check and balance on the whole system. In this law, we are taking away the involvement to some extent of the judicial branch and its discretion, and giving that discretion to the executive branch, to you folks and the prosecutors. And we are, as a legislature, acting in a way for the jury. We're saying
Representative Cannon, is this a question or a long argument?
this is a question, but it is a long question.
Wrap it up.
Thank you. We are saying through this law, if we pass it, that under certain circumstances, namely the weights listed here, that we are making the determination that is typically the jury determination as to intent. We're saying if you have X, you have intent. I'd like you to, I hear what you're saying about prosecutorial discretion and law enforcement discretion. Do you feel like it's necessary to take away judicial discretion and the check that provides, and the discretion of the jury and the check that provides?
Chairman and Representative Cannon, great question. I understand exactly what you're saying, because I do believe in that whole system as well and have preached it forever about legislation makes the laws, I enforce the laws, judiciary finds if they are constitutional. So I'd say yes and no. I don't think we take away the judiciary discretion because we do have the jury portion of it, right? We have the jurors and the judicial that can determine if that law is, if it's even valid that that person has been charged with that crime. I hear the other part of it to say, well, now there's no judicial discretion on how they get sentenced, correct? So it doesn't take away the discretion on if that person is guilty or not. So there's the judicial part doing what it does. I do have concerns with so much discretion at the hands of one single person, because even my discretion as a law enforcement officer on the street doesn't mean that, hey, this is it. We have a big inconsistency with our judicial system. Nothing against judges. They're great people. They work hard and they make good decisions. But here we can at least say, it's not going to be one person that determines what your sentence is. It's the Idaho law that now says that you will be sentenced to this. Now, you really would take away the judiciary if we said, well, it's unconstitutional and we're not going to allow a judge to determine if it's unconstitutional. I think that's where you take away discretion or judicial discretion.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sheriff. We got one more.
One more, Sheriff.
I couldn't see your light the way it's
Well,
tilted.
I didn't
Sorry.
get it over here. You know.
Representative Roten.
Mr. Chairman and Sheriff Clifford, I'll try not to be as long. Some of the reason that we hear some people argue against this, it seems, is that the prosecutors' dockets are already full, the dance cart's full, and the jails are full. I understand now. This is what I understand, is that mandatory minimum convictions only make up 4% of our prison population at this time. That being said, one, is that number correct? And two, would there be room for these new, if there is an increase in convictions? It seems like an odd defense, but I thought perhaps, is there room at the end for if we come across this?
Chairman, Representative Roten, great question. I would say that there's not room anywhere in the state of Idaho in a jail or prison. I'm just being very frank. But I don't think that should deter us from justice. As a sheriff, it's a really strange double-edged sword. I've said it for years and years to say, you turn to your patrol and you say, go catch the bad guys, arrest the people that shouldn't be on the street, that are victimizing people, all that, and then they get in your jail and you say, how do we get these people out of our jail? Well, I'm not willing to give up justice and public safety because I need space in my jail. I want space in my jail, and I have to take care of those people and make sure they're cared for. But I'm not going to kick them out into the public just because I don't want to hold them. They need to be, again, brought to justice, held accountable. As far as are the numbers going to, I don't know the answer to your 4%. I don't know the answer. I'm sorry. I don't have that statistic. The answer to will arrests go up? I don't know. It's meant to be a deterrent. So in a perfect world, arrests would go down because then we would have less fentanyl that comes in. What I do believe is a deterrent like mandatory minimums causes the less fentanyl availability in our society. We've seen it with other things that we put into place by law here in Idaho. And I believe it will work with this too. I believe there will be a deterrent. So, we're not going to have an increase in 4%, I wouldn't believe. But I'm also not a crystal ball.
Now, thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Let's see. It is my plan to take 2 more witnesses for the day. Trevor Chadwick, are you in the room? Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Chairman, and esteemed members of the committee. I had to, obviously, to follow your rules, I changed a lot of things on here. So.
Okay, remember to state your name and where you're from.
Yep, my name is Trevor Chadwick. I'm from the city of Star. I am the mayor, and I just represent my community. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. Fentanyl is a major problem in our state, and it doesn't care about our political affiliation, your religion, or your status in society. Fentanyl will kill everyone equally. In Star, we have put together a team of officers to focus on stopping these drugs from entering our community through the 3 major highways that go through our city. Daily, they make traffic stops finding drugs in vehicles. They find fentanyl, they find drugs laced with fentanyl mixed by uneducated chemists. They find a pill form, they find it in powder form, in candy form, and even now they're finding it in this purple pill form that they have been talking about. Those that are bringing this into our community are missing it to entice or even younger folks to try it. We must take action now to stop this drug from entering our communities or slow it down, our neighborhoods, schools, and homes. House Bill 406 is the bill that will start this process. Fentanyl is the only narcotic without a mandatory minimum, and we continue to see an increase of this drug on our streets and deaths in our community. I would encourage each and every one of you to visit our amazing police officers throughout the state, go on ride-alongs, talk to them about the challenges they're facing with this drug, witness firsthand the chaos fentanyl is creating in our communities. I often ride with my officers and my chief to gain firsthand knowledge with my boots on the ground. I do have a story I can tell you later if you want, but I'll hold off on that. I believe musician Jelly Roll, that was brought up earlier, who testified in Congress last week, said it best. There are about 190 fentanyl-related deaths daily in the United States. This is equivalent to one 747 plane full of people crashing every day. Can you imagine the uproar that we would have here among this body and other bodies in the United States if we see a plane crash daily killing people on board? And I think Representative Earhart brought up a statistic. It was like 200 something, I believe, that she said in Idaho a year in 2022. That's a plane crash every year in the state of Idaho killing people in Idaho, right? Let's take a stand for our communities and our citizens. Our friends, our families, and pass House Bill 406, which will help keep this deadly drug out of our communities, schools, and homes. And let's not forget that dealers are users. Am I out? I'm sorry.
You have to wrap up.
I could be done, but I just got a couple more statements. 4 grams can kill 2,000 people. 40 grams can kill my entire city, right? Or that's 40 packets of sugar, as someone was talking about out here.
I need you to wrap up.
Thank you. Any
Thank
questions?
you. Are there questions of the mayor?
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much
it.
for your patience being here today. And the last witness is Grant Lobes. Mr. Lobes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome to committee. You know the drill.
My name is Grant Lobes. I'm the representative today for the Idaho Prosecuting Attorneys Association. I am the prosecutor in Twin Falls County, where I have been for 30 years. And for those 30 years, I've been dealing with drug prosecutions of all different kinds of drugs. And there has never been a drug as more dangerous, that is more dangerous and more prevalent than fentanyl has become in our state. It is not only coming here, it is here. In Twin Falls County, in the last year, we had 2 cases with over 16 pounds of fentanyl being trafficked through our county, which was enough to kill everybody in Idaho, everybody in Montana, and everybody in Wyoming in 2 stops. So it's here, and it's here to stay, and it's up to us to do something about it. We have to keep in mind at all times when we're dealing with these kind of questions that drug dealing is a business. This is a cash business. This makes people rich beyond your wildest imaginations. These people in the cartels make business decisions like members of the board of directors of IBM. They sit around and they decide what is going to maximize their profit. And what maximizes their profit is moving large amounts into places where it can be sold for large amounts of money. One of the most insidious things they do to maximize their profit is cutting the fentanyl, so they have a little bit of fentanyl, and as been mentioned here today, they sprinkle it in marijuana or something else. You get a bigger high, you like it, it also might kill you. So that's extremely dangerous. My job every morning when I wake up is to make Twin Falls County and Idaho safer for its citizens. You can make Idaho safer for its citizens by passing this bill to help make Idaho a less attractive market for drug traffickers. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
speak into the mic if you would.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman and Prosecutor Lobes. Appreciate you being here. And I'd like to get to the issue I think that is most telling or is most significant with regard to this bill, because I agree with almost everything. You know, everything's been said about how dangerous fentanyl is. We've got to do something. We've got to pass a bill. All there. Okay. But on line 32 through 33, it says, or any mixture or substance containing a detectable amount of any such substance. And by substance referring to the fentanyl, is guilty of a felony. And then there's the categories, and the first one is 4 grams, which is very little, as we've discussed today. My concern is that the detectable amount of such substance could be very, very minimal, and therefore a user is the one that is subject to this statute as opposed to a trafficker. Could you comment? And that's my concern. I'm not saying I've concluded yet, but that's my concern. And I've got a copy of the bill if
I've got it here.
Got that.
I think we got the question.
That's it. If you could comment on that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon, obviously that's been an issue that's been discussed several times here today. And again, let me tell you, every state that has this kind of language, this kind of statute, has this language about mixture. Because when you're in the drug business, as I was alluded to just a minute ago, you further your profits the more you dilute your product. As long as your product has a hit for people, they'll buy it. And if you can sell a little bit in a big, bit of marijuana, or even in cocaine or in something else, then you're going to make more of a profit. So eliminating that mixture language would require us to have a much larger amount of concentrated fentanyl, and it also helps the cartels make more money. I mean, you're just buying into their business practice. It would be like being at their boardroom table and saying, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we put a little bit in a big, inert substance and make a lot more money?" They'll let us do that in Idaho. Why don't we do that? It furthers their interest if we do that. We have to be able to prosecute based on the fentanyl tainted whole, rather than just trying to find the tiny little bit of fentanyl that's in there. And there won't be such a tiny amount in there that you can't measure it. In order to make some marijuana, helpful to the person who's seeking the extra high, you have to put enough fentanyl in there that it actually has a kick to it. And so you're not talking about just a tiny little bit. And this question has come up a couple times before too. What if we find a person that's got 4 grams of marijuana and there's some fentanyl in it? I need to know more about that case. I need to know who put the fentanyl there. I need to know why do they have the fentanyl-laced marijuana? I need to know what they're doing with it, because the people who sell that in that quantity, in that packaging with the marijuana, are doing it with a very horrible consequence and a deliberate consequence. And so, yeah, if we catch a person that's got a marijuana cigarette and they're smoking, they've got fentanyl, and we arrest them, maybe we save their life. If we catch somebody who's got a large quantity of it and they're selling it to other people, maybe we stop them from killing other people. And that's what's behind this bill.
One follow-up?
Yes, please. Okay, but I'd like to get specifically to 4 grams of marijuana, which is a very, very small amount of marijuana, correct? Oh, well, I don't want to be, I'm not supposed to do
It'd be a lot for me.
Huh? Yeah, okay. But it's, well, how much is 4 grams? How much is 4 grams of marijuana?
I would ask one of my sheriff's colleagues to tell me, but, a small amount. Let's call it a small amount for user purposes.
Okay. And so
Is this a third question?
Well, it is, yeah, well.
We want to get out of here, so that's the end of the question.
But I think this is the most important
All right, Representative.
issue that...
Leeway, ask the question.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a small amount of marijuana, and it has a detectable amount of fentanyl in it, whatever that, and that could be very, very small. And so, is that enough to find that someone who has actual or constructive possession of it, as defined in our jury instructions, and knows that they have possession, and know they have possession, is that enough to make them a trafficker? That's all I'm asking.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon, it is technically under the statute, yes, because that's the way the statute, you've quoted the black and white of it, that's what it says. There might be times when that would be an unwise charge to bring. There might be times, as Sheriff Clifford just said, when you wouldn't charge that, because you've got like some kid who just bought this from somebody and he didn't even know it had fentanyl in it, and he's just innocently going about trying to get high on marijuana. I wouldn't charge that. My sheriff wouldn't charge that. I don't know who would charge that. But there might be times when you catch the person who's about to sell it to the kid on the school ground, and that person, there's a completely different thing going on there. And we don't want to cast our net so small that we can't catch that person. The point of this language is to make sure that we defeat the cartel business model of diluting their product by adding inert ingredients to it, and thereby saying, hey, I didn't really have that much. I only had this much. No, you had this whole amount, because you were going to sell this whole amount, and you were going to make this much profit on this whole amount, and you were going to kill this many people with it. So that's the point of this. And as I said, this language is pretty standard across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lobes. I'm wondering if you can just walk us through briefly the process from the time someone is arrested to when would they receive a mandatory minimum sentence? When would that happen in the process?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Dixon, that differs. It depends on what path they take. I don't think everybody wants to listen to my how the criminal justice system works lecture, because it's a long one. But in general, they are arrested on probable cause that they have committed a crime. Maybe the officers know at the time that they have a trafficking amount of fentanyl. Maybe they don't. Maybe they have to send something to the lab, and we have to wait for the lab test to get back. In any case, at some point in that whole process, the prosecutor makes the charges it as a trafficking charge. Once it's charged as a trafficking charge, I think Representative Cannon was mentioning earlier, there is a possibility for a plea agreement that's reached, depending on a whole bunch of other factors. But if it gets to sentencing after a conviction or a plea of guilty as a trafficking charge, that's when the mandatory minimum is applied by the judge, who also has discretion to go above that. That's a minimum, and so the judge can give a greater sentence. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Allgood.
Thank you, sir. This committee, I sense, shares some concern on a wide body. We have discussion here of cartels and how much money they're making and the tactics they're using, and so we want to prosecute these criminals that are trafficking in our drug. But at the clear other end of the perspective, we've heard concerns expressed about high school kids at a party and somebody passes out a pill that turns out to be fentanyl and the disastrous results that could be there. And so what I'm asking is, could you elaborate on prosecutorial discretion when you're looking at the wide margins that you would see between these different crimes?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Allgood, of course I can. It's very complex because every single decision that a prosecutor makes, just like every single decision that a policeman makes or a judge makes, is based on the specific circumstances of a case. So I would need to have all the facts. So I've heard some, hypotheticals being asked today, and it just depends on exactly what's happening. But if you have a person who, first of all, if they don't know that they have fentanyl, they can't be charged under this statute because you have to know that it's fentanyl. So we'll set that part aside, because you can't be a completely innocent person who says, well, I just thought I had, a brownie. No, that person wouldn't be guilty of trafficking of fentanyl, no matter how much fentanyl is in that brownie, because he has to know it's fentanyl. So take that aside. So as a prosecutor, I would look to see, can I prove that the person knew that they had fentanyl? Okay, and then I have to ask, did the fentanyl or the inert amount, the inert ingredient that the fentanyl is mixed in, equal the trafficking amount? If so, then I would still look at other things to say, what are the circumstances of this case? If this person knew they had fentanyl but thought it was just the tiniest amount and they were only using it for themselves, and I had some, proof as to their, what kind of a person they were and what they were doing and what they were caught up in, it might not be charged as a trafficking case. The police probably wouldn't charge it as a trafficking case, as the sheriff just mentioned a minute ago. But, there are all kinds of factors with the same exact type of ingredient, the same exact amount in the same exact brownie or marijuana cigarette, where I would charge it if I believed that that was a case that needed to have this kind of deterrent leveled against it. So it's very difficult to answer every single tiny little what if this, what if that hypothetical, because everything is fact dependent. But the thing is that these kinds of mandatory minimums deter the people we want to deter. They deter the big dealers. They deter the cartels because, as I said, everything they do is business based. They don't want to go to prison for 10 years. They don't want their lieutenants to go to prison for 10 years because, in every business, manpower costs you money. So the point here is to put this bill into place to let the drug dealers know that we're serious about this, that if you deal in large quantities in the state of Idaho, you are going to get hammered, and therefore, being intelligent human beings and in a business to make money, they will say, why bother with Idaho? Let's just go next door. Let's go to Utah where they don't care. Let's go to Nevada where they don't care. Let's go to any state surrounding Idaho where they don't care. We'll make just as much money and we won't go to prison for 10 years. Thank you.
I believe, is there a light down here? Oh. Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Lopes. As you've spoken to the concerns around the mixture language, it sounds like you as a prosecutor would personally want to look at whether the person was simply a user or a simple user, however we want to term that, or whether they were actually intending to distribute. I've been on this committee for a while now, We've had this conversation more than once, and I know that there's some frustration in this room about the fact that we have not yet taken action. This question around intent has been a central question from my observation among members of this committee. So you indicate that you, as a prosecutor, would want to look at the intent of the individual involved. And yet I've been told that intent to distribute or intent to deliver language is a non-starter, absolutely off the table, non-negotiable, will not look at this language. I cannot understand the resistance to intent to distribute language, and I would really like to.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Young, what I was talking about was the extremely tiny marginal cases. The case which you've presented to us in some hypotheticals today, where there isn't anything going on here except a individual user want to get high in this particular case, and they just happen to have some fentanyl. That if you take out the intent, if you add intent language to this whole statute, here's what I'll be able to do if I'm a fentanyl distributor or dealer. I'll be able to have 500,000 pills in my house. And when you knock on my door and your dog sniffs it and they come up and they say, "Oh my God, Grant, you've got 500,000 fentanyl pills in your house. We're charging you with trafficking." I'm just keeping it. I don't intend to do anything with it. Prove that I intend to do anything with it. Idaho State Supreme Court has said that you may not use the amount as the proof that I have intent to sell. So if you add intent to it, then all I have to do as a big-time dealer, producer, manufacturer is just not say anything to you when you knock at my door. Because how are you going to prove that my bedroom stacked floor to ceiling with fentanyl pills is intended for anything? See, the problem is the fact that I have that much is obvious to any reasonable person. I intend to sell it, right? The Supreme Court says no. I have to prove something more than that. I can't just prove the amount. So if you add intent to this, then large shipments, large quantities of drugs will not be prosecutable as trafficking, because we won't be able to prove the intent, because these people are going to be smart enough to tell their people, don't ever say anything about your intent. Don't ever have any ledgers. Don't ever have any records of where it came from and where you're going to take it. And if we don't have those things, we can't prosecute under an intent statute.
Chairman has a question. And this is an ongoing discussion between many of us, and I've heard it said that the amount is the intent in this statute and for law enforcement. Is that correct?
Well, that's one way of putting it. I don't think that the amount is, quote, the intent, because there's no intent, language, no specific intent in this statute. You have the intent to have that amount. And if you have an amount that is greater than the trafficking amount, then that is all that is needed to prove that you are trafficking. So you don't have to intend to do anything but have that amount. Yes, if that answers your question.
Thank you. Hey,
well, you guys let me off easy.
You did all right. We're all tired. Good job. Thank you for traveling here from Twin Falls. Okay, committee, that concludes our testimony. We are going to meet on this on Tuesday. That's our next meeting day. And at that time, we will discuss, see if there's any motions, and take action at that time. Representative Mathias.
Mr. Chairman, for a comment.
Say again?
For a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to share this comment because we have the luxury of having some time to think about what we've heard today and how we might want to, how it might inform our decision next week. And I know you are a student of history, you know I am a student of history, and I think there's two historical events that I think should inform how we reason through this over the next few days. The first historical event was a pretty determinative dinner that happened in an Argentinian hotel room on or around December 2nd, 2018.
Are we getting into argument?
No, we are not, Mr. Chair. In that meeting, the President of the United States finally convinced the President of China to deschedule fentanyl. This is something we've been trying to do for a long time. And we knew at the time, because DE agents testified in the summer of 2018, that if we do this, if we convince China to deschedule or reschedule fentanyl, that they are no longer going to be able to ship it directly to the United States ports all up and down the West Coast. But they're not going to give up because, as we heard earlier, every decision has a reaction. And we knew that it was going to be sent to Mexico, to the cartels, and to Chinese cartels in Vancouver. So it didn't used to get cut before. None of this, the policy decisions matter, and we need to get this right, is my point. The second historical event is the crack epidemic of the 80s. At the time, we were told to be scared and that this is a new drug. And then we were told meth is the new drug, it's scary, we should be scared. And I think the lesson that we should learn is fear is not an emotion that is going to help us make an informed decision on this. So while we heard about planes dropping and needle
Representative
tips...
Mathias, I'm going to stop you. We're getting into what we want to discuss on Tuesday. Appreciate it, and I like swapping history books with you. You saw where I stopped this. Are we going to go into this area, or are we going to meet on Tuesday?
I had a question,
Representative
Chairman,
Cannon?
Your Honor. I had a text from a testifier out there who indicated that he signed up. I don't know if we let everyone that, I wanted to make sure that we got all the sign-up sheets and that we had all those, as opposed to, because I know that there was one that was full and then they started a new one. And I wanted to make sure that the chairman was aware that there are people out there that maybe didn't get to testify.
Thank you, and I'll clarify that, Representative Cannon. People could sign up all the way through our hearing to be on the list, and we didn't get to about a half dozen, and I've had two people, one on each side, text me and say, I have this person, but they're not on the list. So I wouldn't put anybody on the list. So we just didn't get there. We went longer than I expected to today, so we had to stop somewhere. Representative Ehart.
Mr. Chairman, similar question. Might you, and maybe you know because you have information before you, because I too had received a text. Do we have anyone in the audience that had traveled far? You probably have already figured that out. It might be worth asking.
From my understanding of the list, there's no one who would not already be here that traveled just for this. Okay, that concludes our meeting. Thank you. Good job listening. Good job, all those who testified. It helped me on both sides, what you had to share.